You are listening to the Little Psychic Podcast with June Mack, which was formerly known as the Fully Woo Podcast. I hope you enjoy. Hi there, I'm your host June Mack, and you're listening to the Fully Woo Podcast. I'll be talking about all the fun woo-woo things in a down-to-earth, bright, light-hearted and easy to navigate way. Hopefully, I'll be able to help you ignite and light the way on your own spiritual journey and evolution too. In today's episode, I introduce to you the idea and inspiration behind the Fully Woo podcast. I'll also talk about turning psychic. How exactly did I get here? How did I end up going from working a, in quotes, normal job to speaking with spirit for a living? I'll cover my story growing up. Was I someone who was always in tune, or did it just one day happen? I hope you'll stick around to join me as I recount my journey up until now. This is part 1 of 2. Have you always wondered if maybe you were a little bit psychic? Well, this episode of the Fully Woo podcast was brought to you by Bloom, my 101 psychic development mentoring program. Bloom is a 7-week experience to help you awaken your psychic senses, create a connection with your spirit guides, and enhance your own intuition. It's suitable for beginners, and you can learn more via junemac.com/programs. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Fully Woo podcast. I am so excited to be here. First of all, if you don't know me, my name is June Mack, and I currently work in the spiritual world. I have my own business, what you might call a spiritual entrepreneur, or I love the term light worker, which basically just means to me someone who is here to help transmute darkness into light, or I also love to think of it as helping others to find their light. I don't think there's an actual one word which might describe what I do, but I know that for other people out there to fully understand some terms which might help are that I offer psychic or guidance readings. I guess the easiest way that I can describe my sessions are that I am a spirit guide interpreter. So basically when I read for you, I kind of imagine it like our spirit guides are communicating and your spirit guides are talking to my spirit guides, which then pass on the messages to me. And they show me things like symbols. Sometimes I hear words, and sometimes I have feelings or can tap into emotions. And basically it's up to me to interpret what it is that's coming through and try to relay that on to you. What I basically get a lot of is to help you to become the best version of yourself. I feel like your spirit guides really just want to push you in the right direction to help you achieve exactly what it is that you agreed to do before coming down onto this earth. And they really do just want to help you navigate your way through our dense earthly issues. I really do try my best to relay this information. And I always set the intention before every reading to only pass on information that you need to hear and that you are ready to hear. I'm also a clairvoyant among other psychic abilities. Also, I possess clairaudience, which is the psychic sense of hearing. Clairvoyant is the psychic sense of seeing. I'm going to talk about all of these psychic senses in another episode though, because otherwise we'll be here for a while if I start going through them all. My abilities have definitely increased as I've gone along. I see things like past lives. Sometimes during readings, I will, galactic beings might even come through for you. I generally connect with or see the most clearly at least once of your spirit guides in particular. Occasionally I will see 2. But all of these stories are kind of for another time. I'll just sort of throw out the basics. I also tend to see which chakras are blocked. And at the beginning, I couldn't do anything about it. I would just send them on to somebody else. But because of this, I also started recently learning energy healing. So I offer intuitive energy healing. I did my Reiki as well, so I can offer that as well. I also converse with or have the ability to communicate with the past over, so mediumship. I love talking about all of these things, all of these types of things. They just light me up. So I'm just so pumped to actually have the opportunity to talk about this and be able to share my voice. I've always loved, growing up, like those spooky stories, things that can't be explained, life after death experiences, signs from your spirit guides, all of it. It just gets me going. So being able to finally have a podcast, I know I already mentioned this, but it's especially to talk about something that I'm so passionate about and so excited about. I'm just so stoked to be here. So thank you for tuning in, and finally also to be brave enough to share my voice on something like this. It's been on my bucket list for probably around 2 years now. I'm just so pumped to be able to finally bring it to you. So before I sort of get into my story, which is what this episode and the next will be about, why is it called the Fully Woo Podcast? Why did I decide to call it that? And what does it even mean for those of you who are not from the spiritual world? You may not have even heard the term woo-woo, which to me is just a more lighthearted or fun way of saying spiritual, without it having to feel so heavy. Or like people, you go spiritual, or I'm a spiritual person, people go, ooh, like, she must be weird, or that's a bit creepy. Like some people do get freaked out or get like a serious feeling when you use the term spiritual, and I don't want to scare people off from it. So, I mean, if you know me, I'm not scary at all, at least I don't think I am. And woo-woo to me is just like this light-hearted way of saying it. Like I'm into all this woo-woo stuff. It's kind of just like a tongue-in-cheek, like making it light, making it fun. If you look up the actual definition for woo-woo though, it's looked upon as a derogatory term for someone who has unconventional beliefs, which are usually unconventional spiritual beliefs and have little or no scientific basis. Although science is catching up, but that again is another episode. When I first started getting deeper into my spiritual awakening journey, I just liked the term woo-woo, and I used it quite often when explaining things to other people or when I was talking about spiritual things. And I have to say, I did get told off more than once from other spiritual workers or other light workers in the field, saying that it wasn't the right word to use, or they felt that it dumbed down what it is that we do. And some even said that they found the word offensive, which I suppose if you look up the definition, derogatory term, I can definitely understand their point of view. And I'm definitely not talking anyone else down. Absolutely understand that is your opinion and it's completely respected. Definitely get that. I just won't use that term around you. But I am such a big believer in you can make things whatever you want them to be. And me as a person, I don't think that I take myself too seriously. I am very fun-loving. I am a bright and bubbly person, and I wanted to take back the word and give it back its power. Let's make being woo-woo empowering and fun. I think there's so much power, especially these days, in owning your woo-woo-ness or your spirituality or whatever it is that you want to call it. People are becoming less afraid of being different or less afraid of standing out. And I really think that is truly a beautiful and amazing thing. I think that I am a fun person, and doing things like, reading oracle cards, playing with crystals, oils, all that stuff, like doing readings on friends is all fun for me. It really always has been. And I just love my work. And what I do, I love my work and what I do like nothing else. So that's just what I want this podcast to be. to bring the idea of spirituality back to earth, kind of normalize it as much as we can. There's the idea out there that, you know, if you're a spiritual person, you have to be all airy-fairy, you know, like flitting around, love and light, which is, you know, I have friends like that, and that's amazing. But you don't have to lose who you are if that's not you. If that's you, awesome. They are like my favorite kind of people. They light me up. They spread happiness and joy everywhere. They are the good news people. That's amazing. But if that's not you, you don't have to be like that. Do you know how many people who meet me or realize what it is, what I do, and say, oh, but you don't look like a psychic. What is a psychic supposed to look like? Exactly. They're not, I sort of want to get the word out there that they don't always have to look like how they do, you know, in the Hollywood movies. Sometimes they're portrayed in ways like being the strange, you know, crazy cat lady, or like, oh, you know, the movie Robin Hood Men in Tights. I know that's the silliest movie ever, but that's one of the movies that I grew up on. You know, the train, the witch in that movie. She's like got the big nose. She makes things out of eyeballs and mixes things up. Like, you don't have to be spiritual and be somebody like that if that's not who you are. Totally go for it if that's you, if you want to be like the train. What else? Oh, con merchants like in Ghost, Whoopi Goldberg, you know, in the big gold outfit she wears in the beginning, and she starts out not being an actual legit medium and then ends up an actual legit medium. So, you know, there's also that idea out there that for some people that what we do isn't a legitimate thing. That again is a whole nother topic. But I hope that this podcast, you know, is something that can show you that you can still be you. You can still be silly. You can still have all the sides of you that you love. Like me, for example, I love a bit of trash reality TV. I love trashy mags. They help me to turn my brain off because my brain is, you know, going 100 miles an hour majority of the time. I don't know how to calm myself down, and those things calm me down. They help to ground me. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but they bring me back to, you know, the non-seriousness of things. I love a bit of trash TV. I love hanging out with friends just like everybody else. I don't walk around, you know, always channeling dead people or channeling psychic messages. In fact, most of the time I have that switched off, except for when I'm at work. You know, I'm a mum. I have 2 little girls. I will switch it off and I will be mum me, and I will be down on the ground, you know, bouncing around like a frog, because that's what I do when I'm around my girls. So let's change what being spiritual is known as. I hope that this helps to awaken more people. I hope that I can speak about spirituality or woo-woo-ness in blatant terms so that anyone can understand. I don't want to make it, I do listen to some people who are, you know, maybe perhaps a bit further down in their spiritual journey. And when they talk about things, it literally goes straight over my head. I have absolutely no idea what it is they're talking about because they are so knowledgeable. But when you're someone who does talk about things in, you know, blatant terms or in a down-to-earth way, or maybe you're just at the start of your spiritual journey, I really found those people hard to follow. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just am hoping that this podcast can try and keep it on simple terms, because I'm a simple person, right? I need it to stay in that simple format because that's just me. Like, honestly, I have problems. So basically, get it out there that you can be spiritual and you can be you, and you is exactly who you want to be, exactly what you want to make yourself. You don't have to be, you know, there's another thing out there, like someone said, oh, you're a spiritual person, so you must be vegan. You don't have to be. You can drink cans of Coke, you can drink cans of vodka, whatever it is you want to do, you can just be that. So, with that being said, at what point did I turn fully woo? How did I get this way? At what point did I stop working in a mainstream or a, what do they call those things, those talking marks, normal, you know, those things that they do with their fingers in Austin Powers, laser beam points, talking points. So normal job, and start psychically tapping into people for a living. Fully woo, or when did you turn fully woo? That is kind of the question that a lot of people had been asking me, and I want to explain that properly, because I feel like, I don't like to keep people for too long, and when I'm explaining it in workshops or in readings, I sort of skim over it. I don't go in deep, and even now I'm not going to go into it so deep, but it is going to probably go over 2 episodes, because I want to try and keep these episodes a little concise. So, to the outside world, or to some people that knew me who weren't talking to me so often, because of COVID and things, we all went and hermited for a while. It probably looks like, to the outside world, or to, these people, that 1 minute I was teaching first aid. So that is literally the job that I did right before I started doing my spiritual work. So I was teaching people first aid, quite a normal job. And the next minute, I'm saying that I'm talking to spirit. It might have seemed quite sudden, or I had some people even say like they were scrolling Instagram, and then next minute they were just like, what? Wait, what? Why is she talking about psychic centers and things? Like, what's going on? But this for me has actually been a lifelong evolution. I just never really spoke to too many people about it. Obviously my very close friends and family knew that I was always kind of into this stuff, or sometimes it just didn't come up in conversation. Like even now when I make new friends, they might not have any idea what I do, because I haven't asked. So if it doesn't come up in conversation, I'm going to walk around going, hey, sometimes I see little passed away people on my stairs, in my stairwell. It just doesn't come up sometimes. So don't get me wrong, I would have never have believed or set a goal that this is who I wanted to become in the early days. I would have never dared to believe that this is what I would be doing. No way. Even a year and a half ago, this would have just completely blown my mind. I have no idea. I can't even stress that enough. But it definitely is something that if I were to know, say when I was a teenager or whatever, how I would turn out, I would probably still be psyched for it. Because I've just sort of always had this on the back burner, or been into this stuff on the back burner. So I guess I'll start from when I was a child. Growing up, I was part of a Catholic family. My mother is Filipino, so a huge part of the Philippines is Catholic, and they're all brought up Catholic. They all pray, they all go to church every Sunday. We went to church every Sunday. RE is a part of their school curriculum. It's just something that is a part of the way that they live. And my dad believed in God too, and he converted to Catholicism, is that how you say it? Because of my mum. In saying that though, both of them are, or were, my father he's recently passed away. But the point is, both of them were extremely open and flexible in their Catholic beliefs. They didn't necessarily follow, strict Catholic guidelines. So, for example, I know that they're both open to the LGBTQ community. I know they believed in contraception because I know that they were very purposeful about only having 2 children. My dad growing up was the one who explained to me about how past lives work. I always remember, him having that conversation with me and me being completely captivated and into it. So, oh my gosh, I literally just saw a feather fall down outside in front of me. Obviously a sign that this is a cool thing that I'm doing, or a good thing that I'm doing. My parents often repeated this story to me. So there was a story when I was a child. I think I was about 2, speaking obviously, so maybe nearly 3. And my dad's auntie, who he was very close to, and we were very close to, up until that point, my mum was close to her as well. And we'd just been to the house of her daughter, so my dad's cousin, and, you know, obviously comforting them and hearing about what had happened. And we were just leaving the house and we were in the car, and my mum and dad both describe it as in they could feel my dad's auntie there in the car with them, almost like seeing them off like she used to always come and see us off, and kind of like a little bit of a farewell. And they both, afterwards, when they were talking about it, got the feeling that she was with her husband. So they were coming in together because they both knew the husband as well. And when we got to I'm getting goosebumps while I'm talking about this. When we got to a certain point on the road, which was maybe like 100 meters away from the house, they both felt the presence recede, and they were saying that they felt like tingles up and down their body, and they didn't say anything to each other at this particular time. This is just a story that I know so well because they tell me about it all the time. It was at that point that I said in the back, it's okay, because they've gone now, they've left. So, and they both looked at each other and were like, oh my gosh, what did she just say? Because, you know, I was only a very small child, and even at that point I was feeling the same things that they were feeling, which was like a final, you know, farewell from my great aunt. And that was one of the earliest memories that I have heard of from my parents, because I don't remember this really myself. I think I do, but you know when you think you remember something but you're actually just remembering from the story that's been told. And I'm not telling you about these circumstances because I think I'm any more special than anyone else, or that I think that I'm one of those rare chosen ones. I don't actually think that that's true. I do believe that we are all born with these abilities. They're just not usually encouraged, and we, you know, accidentally shut them down, or sometimes our parents accidentally shut them down. And this is probably, you know, what happened to me at some point, because I do also remember having here's that quotation marks thing again, I'm doing that you can't see, an imaginary friend growing up who I named Emily. And I remember, I just remember seeing her and playing with her and her being there. And I do believe that Emily left because this was shut down as my imagination from my mum, who, you know, and there was no ill intent behind it. She just actually got worried that I was losing my mind, because me and my younger sister are 5 years apart. So there's quite a big gap there. And mum was keen to have another one. But dad, you know, my dad is an older father, or he was an older father because he just passed away this year. But he wasn't so sure about having another child because he was already that much older. And mum was like, oh my gosh, she's going crazy. She's made up an imaginary friend because she's lonely. We need to have this second child, you know, which they did eventually, which is my amazing, you know, younger sister. But she was always telling me there's nobody there. There's nobody sitting in that chair. And I'd say things like, you're sitting on Emily. And mum was like, oh my gosh, this is too much. Like, she was fully worried. Let's have another baby stat, because our oldest child is just losing her crap. So I guess, you know, I remember mum saying it's not real. And then I remember that she left. And now thinking back to Emily, I 100% think that Emily was real. I think that I was talking to a little passed away girl. So there's those instances growing up that I had. I did notice from early on as well that I would have a dream about something occurring and then it would actually come true. And when I run my workshops and things like this, and I say, how many of you have ever had this happen before? I would say probably half the room put up their hands. Like, this is just a thing that happens. I would see things which I now know are messages from spirit. Like, there was a one time when I was a child and I lost this little toy dog that I just loved so much, that my parents bought for me. And I was so distraught. I just remember crying because it had fallen out of my school bag. And I remember visually seeing, all of a sudden, it was like I was crying, and then I got comforted because I was shown where this toy dog had fallen out of my bag. And I remember the next day running to this spot, like on the way. So it was when my parents would drop me off at school. I remember the same track that we'd walk down, being dropped off at school, and finding it exactly where Spirit had shown me, like, stop losing your crap and we'll show you where it is. Like, don't be so upset. So there was that, instances like that too. I remember really only confiding in my mum's sister, so an auntie, about this. So she's also passed away now. Please, God rest her soul. But she would tell me about things like astral travel. She taught my mum energy healing and Reiki and crystal healing. And I grew up with all of this stuff around me, even being in a Catholic family. And I do consider this lucky, and I am so grateful for this, because this means that to some degree it was easier for me to be open about these things when I did decide to step out of the closet. It wasn't my family so much that I had to be afraid of. It was more everybody else that I was packing my dacks about. And my auntie told me, when I confided in her, she told me I was special and to try not to lose these things and to try not to shut it down. I remember feeling other people's emotions growing up and wondering why other people didn't seem to feel it. Like, if another child was crying, I remember being really upset and being really able to empathize with this other child too. And then it didn't seem like anybody else would get upset, but then I would. So I wondered why. I always wondered why no one else seemed to be able to feel the things that I was feeling. I remember telling my husband at school about it. So we went to high school together. Yes, we've been together a very long time. It's coming up to 19 years this year. He was one of the first people that I opened up to about from school, really, from high school, and he didn't even bat an eyelid. And I remember that was, one of the signs that I knew that he was the person for me, because he's been so supportive of me on this journey. And my relationship with him, he's always known about my abilities. He found it really hard to surprise me in the past, because I didn't used to know how to control this. Now I can switch it on and off like that. But going through life up until the past couple of years, it would come in and out and I wouldn't know how to control it. So I knew the day he was going to ask me out. I literally had it written in my phone. I wrote down November 20th, the day that Macca is going to ask me out. And when he asked me and gave me, the little gift with it and everything, I was like, I knew this was going to happen. He's like, oh, what, really? And I remember showing him in my phone, November 20th, the day I was going to be asked out. I remember, when what Christmas presents he was going to get me. He'd be like, you know what you're getting, don't you? I'm like, oh yeah, I've already seen, it in a dream as a dressing gown coming, or I've seen it in a little vision. My engagement ring, I saw what it was going to look like before he actually proposed. And I remember him, and I didn't think like he was actually going to propose. I just remember telling him about this ring that I'd seen, in like a vision, and it had like a big diamond in the middle and 2 on the sides. And I remember him going away, and just walking out of the room. And apparently he was like calling his mum, absolutely cracking it, because I'd obviously described the ring that he just bought. But at the time I didn't realize that it was actually going to be mine. I'd just seen the ring, and I remember it used to frustrate him so much. There's so many things like that he found it really hard. I saw both our children, so both our girls, before they were born. They were shown to me in dreams, and I described both of them exactly how they were going to look before we actually had them. So one of the coolest stories in regards to that is my oldest daughter. Me and my husband, we both have brown eyes, and me being half Filipino, we never thought that having a child with blue eyes is a possibility. But I was shown a dream. I was shown a baby that I knew was just mine, with bright blue eyes. And I remember waking up and saying to my husband, I think I've just seen our baby. And because I was pregnant at the time, and he said, and then we laughed, and I said, but it can't be, because she had blue eyes and there's no way we'd have a baby with blue eyes. My oldest daughter, who is now 8, has blue eyes, bright blue eyes. They have not changed. I love it because my dad's English, he has blue eyes, and it's like, something from him, especially now that he's passed. My husband's mum also has blue eyes, so obviously there's a recessive gene there, but just thinking with my Asian heritage, there is no way we were going to have a baby with blue eyes, but she does. She's the only one in our family, but it's so special. What else? So growing up, going further, at work, I had this strange ability, or everyone would be like, what is with you, because I would know when something was about to go down. You know, like we used to work with a lot of people, and when people were going to have a big argument or someone was going to get in trouble, I would always feel it and mention it to someone, and then something, you know, crazy would happen, and they'd be like, what? You totally called that. I used to work in HR, so another normal job that I have, that I had. I could always tell who were going to be the good workers, and people would be like, you hire the best people, you have such a good, you know, such a good track record of hiring all the good workers. And I totally thought it was just because I was really good at my job. Now looking back on it, I realize accidentally I was incoherently tapping into them and reading them as a person, like, yep, hard worker, honest, they really want this job, they're loyal, and then, you know, I'd hire them, and that's why they turn out to be good workers. I actually maybe wasn't that great at my job. You know, I'd have dreams as well of maybe I'd have close friends, passed over fathers or loved ones who would come and visit me, and I would pass on messages you know, to my friends from their dad or what have you, and they would turn out to be completely accurate about what was going on in their lives. I would predict pregnancies or just know when friends were pregnant, like from the moment of conception. I would literally see sometimes like a little egg attaching to a wall, and then just know, like, think of a person, and I would call them or message them and say, are you pregnant? And they're like, no. And then literally it was at that would be the time of conception, because they would message or call me like a month later and be like, oh my gosh, I literally must have just fallen pregnant like the night before you called me or you messaged me about seeing that egg or whatever attach. I was literally seeing the moment of conception, which is so awkward. But things like that would happen. I really, growing up, totally fangirled people like John Edwards. I watched all the spiritual shows. Tyler Henry, still love him. Drawn to the spiritual section at the library, angel books, spiritual stories. I went to conventions, you know, back in the day, even you know, back in the day, oh my gosh, I feel so old, when I was a teenager, and you'd go to a library and the spiritual section, or they used to call it New Age, was so tiny. I'd always, you know, be magnetized to that section, whereas now it's huge, right? It's in Big W. You can find spiritual section in Big W. But I remember just always wanting to read it. That's just all I was interested in, really. That and biographies. I love biographies. Yeah, I actually started, I would, you know, take my dad to conventions. I would drag him along because he was, you know, he loved all this stuff too. I started going to readings when I was in my early 20s. So from early 20s was when I first had my first experience, and haven't really stopped going since. Growing up the way I did, I never had any doubt in my mind that there is so much more than just this physical world that we experience. I had absolutely no doubt. I'd already seen and felt so much proof. I didn't need anyone to explain it to me. I just knew. It was a belief for me that has never wavered. And if you are different to this, and you are new to all of this stuff, and you never believed before, and maybe now you're just starting to get interested, I don't believe that matters in regards to you potentially having, you know, psychic abilities or gifts. I don't believe that you are ever too late to awaken. I was just, you know, prior to this, very careful to who I shared this stuff with. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid that people would think that I was totally weird, which they probably still do, or that, you know, in high school, like, it's just definitely something that was like not cool. But yeah, so up until now, this is the only time that I've sort of gotten the guts up enough to be able to share it. With myself, you know, going through the years, it's something that would happen in and out. It would happen in phases. You know, I'd be super psychic 1 minute, and then it would go away for maybe like 6 months or whatever, then come back. It was never something that I focused on or dedicated a lot of time to. It was never something that I could control when or how it would happen. It just did. It was never the focus of my life until now. I could never control it until now. I was never brave enough to be open with it until now. So how did that happen? What changed in me? What events unfolded to get me to this point? So, you will have to listen to the next part of this story, the part 2 of 2, so the next episode in my Turning Psychic, How Did I Get Here story. Thank you so much for listening to my story to this point, to my first episode. I'm so grateful to have you here. I just can't wait to share the rest of my journey with you. And until next time when we connect, you will hear me then. I'm June Mack, and I wanted to thank you for tuning in to the Fully Woo podcast. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have had you here. You can find me over at junemack.com or on all social media as Ms. June Mack. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much if you could please subscribe, rate, review, and share. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a privilege to be in your ears.